Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Strength and Speed owner Evan Preparis. I'm flying solo for this one, but I do have another guest on the line. First, quick word from our sponsors, though. This episode is brought to you by Hammer Nutrition. If you aren't using Hammer Nutrition, I'm not sure what you're doing for your endurance training. They simply have the best products on the market. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it a lot more in this episode because my guest is also a Hammer Nutrition sponsored athlete. So my favorite products are Perpetuum. It's a fat carb protein blend. I use it for all my ultra endurance fueling. And then my other favorite product I'd say is REMCap. So it's a sleep aid, helps you sleep deep at night, recover faster. And then they have the standard line of stuff like gels, caffeinated gels, which are great for the really long events. And then they also have things like HEED, which is essentially a maltodextrin, so a carb electrolyte blend that you put into water, and you can drink that on the course or in your aid station or etc. So really great line of products. And then not beyond that, they essentially have a full line of health products. So you can go and get your daily vitamins there, fish oil, all sorts of good stuff there. So check them out, hammernutrition.com. And if you use code 240887, you get 15% off your first order from them. If you're not sure what to buy, check out the long course fueling kit, which is essentially a mix of products and flavors. Allows you to try a little bit of everything, and then from there you can kind of place a bigger order with the stuff you like. All right, let's get into the episode. I have, like I said, another Hammer Nutrition sponsored athlete, Rob Steger. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm notorious for bringing people on the podcast and not asking how to pronounce their last name. So I feel like I do pretty good. But anyway, quick intro on Rob, and then we'll start talking to him. So Rob's an ultra runner himself. Like I said, sponsored by Hammer Nutrition. Also, like me, he hosts his own podcast called Training for Ultra, which is around probably, 90 episodes now?
Coming up there, yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, he's also an author, so released his first book, was it earlier this year or last year?
Earlier this year.
Okay.
Just a few months ago, 3 months ago or so, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that. It's available on both hard copy and digital. And then on top of that, has been competing in ultras since 2015. Done a mix of stuff, a couple hundreds here and there. Done about 20 ultras total. And I was also finished the Moab 240, which is quite possibly the longest ultra, one of the longest ultras that's like officially sanctioned race. After that, you get into stuff like FKTs, fastest known times, and kind of record-setting runs. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I liked all your Hammer Nutrition recommendations. I mean, I don't know if you would be using them if you weren't a sponsored athlete, but I would. And you hit on one that no one talks about, the Perpetuum. I use that in every ultra. I just wanted to throw it out there. It's a great product.
Absolutely. I think Perpetuum is hands down the best endurance fueling product, period. And I would use them regardless. Have you read the book Endure?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so in that book, they're specifically talking about fueling, obviously for endurance stuff, and they talk about essentially using every pathway. So, fat, carb, protein, and your body won't. It's not just burning fat or just burning carbs. Like it's burning everything in different ratios. So if you take it all in, your body will burn everything to its maximum capacity. And I think that's what Perpetuum does versus some of these other ones that are just like, here is sugar water. And you're like,
I know, right?
Yeah.
So why am I having a gut bomb at mile 25?
Right. And I try to explain it, but people are like, oh yeah, I use, and they name another product, which I'm not going to name. And they're like, it's like the same thing. I'm like, it's not the same thing, guys. Like, legitimately, I have not found another product that has the same kind of nutritional profile as Perpetuum.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, so let's get into enough about Hammer Nutrition, which I'm sure will come up again later. But kind of let's get into you and how you got into ultra running, and then we'll talk about some crossover points with OCR. So give me a quick kind of how you fell into the world of ultra distance running.
I mean, it was a strange occurrence, I guess. I mean, my dad had a big health scare. I got a phone call late one night after he'd had heart surgery or heart stents put in. Um, and he was very fortunate that he didn't, have a massive heart attack. But he's like, this is genetic. Just wanted to tell you. So it was a very eye-opening experience. I'd been just stressed out, working nonstop, pretty much 80-hour weeks, uh, no activity. Literally, if I went for a walk, my fingers would be tingling. Like I was that, I was on a pretty bad path. And my dad's health scare kind of gave me the kick that I needed in the butt to like, okay, shape up your diet is where I started. Um, yeah, I was pretty stressed out, not only at work, but then trying to figure out how to solve this, how to, get off this same path that my dad was on. I truly think I would have had a massive heart attack at 35 or 40. Um, I'm not 40 yet, so maybe I will. But I was watching, I was literally ready to grasp onto anything that came at me. And I randomly turned on Netflix and saw Joe Cross, who did this juicing cleanse thing, which was pretty extreme. But at that point, I had really no options. So I did the green juice recipe for like 30 or 40 days. I initially went into it for like 3 days and was like, okay, I'll take it day by day. But then, like many things in my life, I like making it a challenge for myself. And I just kept going and I lost. So I weighed 200 pounds, which I'm 5'6" on a good day, 5'7". I'm pretty short. So I was pretty heavy and I lost 50 pounds. And all of a sudden, I found myself with all this energy. And I didn't know what to do with myself. In the back of my head, I had read Ultra Marathon Man by Dean Karnazes. And so I knew about ultra running. I thought like maybe I could run a 50K and call myself an ultra runner and be happy the rest of my life. But yeah, a coworker asked me, how long are you going to still juice? Because everyone was asking me what I was doing because I just shed all this weight. I had all this energy. My mood was much better. I was a different person essentially after losing all that weight. And I told the guy, I was like, you know what? I'll transition into running for whatever reason. I hadn't even run before. Uh, like I literally was not a runner. Like growing up, I golfed, I played hockey. I don't know why I said that. So apparently I became a runner all of a sudden. And yeah, it's a pretty humbling start. I took, but I mean, like everything I do, I'm either all in or nothing at all. And I went for it. I just started running basically every day. You know, it broke me. I took second to last place in my very first race. It was a local half marathon. And the person that came in last place was a recovering heart attack. I think he had heart surgery, and it was his first half marathon. So like, yeah, it was a very humbling start to running. I hurt myself during that race, and this is I think this is November of 15. I had run for like 2 months, decided to do a half marathon, busted my knee, took all of December off, and just tried to regroup. And yeah, from there, I mean, I literally hit the trails. That was my big change. I started running a local trail in Columbus, Ohio, and all of a sudden, I got one 30K race under my belt and ran a marathon in April. And then I just leveraged that into a local 50K trail race in May. And then June, I did a 50 miler on trails. And then I went for a 100 miler in, I think it was July or August.
Wow, that's a quick turn from not running at all to 100.
Yeah, I don't advise that path, but that's what I did. So,
Yeah,
um,
That's impressive. And so it's funny you said, you came in second to last, because you've reinforced a point I brought up on my podcast before when I said, I've said the only people who know who comes in last are the guy who comes in last and the guy who comes in second to last. Like no one else knows who came in last because no one else cares, right? Like you don't look at results and you're like, oh, let's see who came in last. Like I've never done that ever, unless I feel like I'm in last place.
I mean, I tried to describe it in the book. I agree. I turned around, like I'm maybe 200 yards from the finish line, and I see last place like coming at me. And I just tear up, and my knee is so messed up. And I'm just like, I'm probably crying, and I just in pain, if anything, just because I found distance running. I had done 16, 17 milers before that half marathon, and running a quick half marathon before work, like just for a training run, no problem. And it was putting my life in balance. And then to have that all taken away, like, yeah, it was pretty disturbing. Like all of December, I read a book on ultra running every day in December. So probably 25 or 30 books.
Oh, wow.
And I became a ultra runner mentally way before physically being able to do it.
So that's awesome. I feel like you can, obviously I write books, so I'm a big proponent of people reading books, but I feel like you can take a lifetime of people's lessons and experience in a book and then consume that information. And you reading 25 ultra books, like you'll essentially start to see huge trends among like training and race preparation and stuff like that. So what are yours? Nutrition. So what are some of your favorite ultra running books? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, Born to Run, obviously. Ultra Marathon Man is my absolute favorite. And then, man, there's just so many of them after that.
I mean, those are the two that I would say most, those are the two that I think pull the most people into ultra running. Born to Run was one of the few times in my life where I read a book and I was like, I put it down. I was like, I need to run an ultra marathon like right now. Like I need to. Otherwise, like I don't have this feeling very often because I'd done them before I'd read that book. But I was like, I need to sign up for one like in the next month because I am motivated and it's gonna, I got to go out there and crush it. So I signed up for a 40 trail race, which did not go well. I pulled my quad around mile 10 and then proceeded to run on it for the next 25 miles until it hurt so much that I was limping and basically limped the last 10 miles into the finish. So. But.
Yikes. My takeaway from that book, as weird as this is, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of information, was changing my foot strike. So centering my foot strike more under my body.
Okay.
Because I kept rolling my ankles on the trails because I was basically heel striking. And so I don't know why, of all the great information in that book, it really helped me focus on where my foot is coming down and making sure it's underneath my body and making sure my cadence is, roughly 180 foot strikes per minute or something like that, per mile. So it really helped me on that front. So then my knee issues started going away because I wasn't heel striking, which was like a whole chain reaction. So as weird as that is, that was like the one like major takeaway for me personally. But yeah, I love ultra running books. I love all running books. There can't be enough of them.
I agree. I used to go to Barnes and Nobles and I would just like, I'd either buy a running book or I'd sit there in the Starbucks and like read through it over several days and then pick up a new one. Like at one point, I had read every essentially running book that I thought was of any value in Barnes and Nobles, like my local Barnes and Nobles. So, strongly agree with that. All right, so you do 100-miler pretty early in your running career, and then
I DNF'd. Yeah.
Oh, you okay.
Yeah.
So what was the kind of the lesson learned from that experience?
I had talked to some pretty experienced ultra runners before that particular race. That was towards Cleveland, Ohio, and the first 20 miles were on road, and they said wear road shoes. So I wore road shoes, and then I was going to pick up my crew at mile 50, and I clipped a giant root, probably mile. I literally was looking down at my watch, excited, knowing like I actually have potential here to do what I came out to do, like, run 100 miles. Clipped a giant root, and it didn't take off my big toenail, but it just smashed it up really, really bad, to the point where it was rubbing on the top of the toe box. So I ran into mile 50, and like people were commenting like, "Hey, you look pretty good. Like you're actually running mile 50." But when I hit the downhills, it was so painful that if I walked, I was limping, and I just pulled the plug at mile 50, knowing like, okay, like lesson learned on wearing trail shoes on the trails with toe guards and rock plates. Seems pretty basic, but I had to learn that the hard way. And I could also see beyond 50 miles at that point, and I knew I was capable of doing it. So it was hard to force myself to be patient, but I healed up, did another 50K in northern Michigan, had a really great, more of a life experience there, and seeing what's outside of Ohio and how amazing those trails were and how the trail community was. And then I finished a 50 miler at the North Face in Wisconsin. And so, I was layering on all these 50Ks and 50 milers. So yeah, it worked out. I knew I had to be patient. But I really was not focused on speed at all. Like what was driving me, what got me up early mornings to go for a run, or, my passion was distance. So I always wanted to see how far I could run. And my goal basically is mid-September of 15, when I very first run I went on was 12-minute miles, or as many miles as I want. That's like my ultimate goal in running. So
interesting. So after your 100 DNF, when did you complete your first 100, and how far after that from your kind of initial stardom running was that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was early June of 17. So 2016 was the first year I had accomplished a ultra. So it was May of 16, Thunder Bunny 50K, and first 50 miler was June of 16. And then 1 year from that first 50 miler was my first 100 miler kettle moraine 100 miler in Wisconsin. It was not the most ideal conditions. There's like a giant rainstorm, ton of one-off situations, but was able to get that done. And it really boosted my confidence a lot.
Awesome. And what's your big goal for 2019 you have coming up?
Triple Crown at 200s. So Bigfoot 200, which is in August, and then the Tahoe 200 in September, and the Moab 240 in October.
And for any of our listeners not tracking, those are 200-mile running foot races. So, or 240 in the last one's case. And you've done...
Yeah, they're all longer than 200, which is kind of weird too.
Round down,
like
I guess.
206, and then 240 something, 242 probably.
Yeah, I guess it just doesn't sound. It just doesn't sound as good. If a nice round number sounds better, I guess. So let's go from your. So you finish 100, and what makes you like, oh well, I've got 100, so might as well do 240 next. That makes sense. So kind of tell us about that jump.
Yeah, 200 milers were on the radar just because, I work full time. I'm doing all these extra ultra running activities. I have 2 kids. Life's really busy. So 200 milers to me was like, okay, like you're not going to go die trying to FKT. Like there's a spot tracker GPS device that each runner has on them. So like, yeah, they're dangerous in some regards, but they're also probably as safe as it gets when you go beyond, I don't know, 150 milers or 150 miles anywhere. Um, but yeah, I started gaining confidence. I would say I had a lull in 17 where I had some knee issues, came back from that knee issue, had a really great Javelina 100 in October of 17. I think it was right around, I mean, goal pace was try to crack 24 hours, but again, speed it didn't appeal to me. It was more like, how do you run through the desert for 100 miles?
Mm-hmm.
And that race got up above 100 degrees at certain points, and everyone was trashed all around me, and I just managed to keep going, which is that's my background in running. I'm just dumb enough to keep running. And going into 18, I started very ambitiously with, ultra running has the ultimate like Super Bowl of ultra running is the Western States 100, and it's a huge lottery system to get into it. And so golden ticket races are kind of the gold standard of races that are deemed good enough to be a race to get automatic qualifiers into Western States, and then you can also run a qualifier. And so I started 18 with just a few days into 18 doing the Bandera 100K and easily making the qualifying time. So I had a ticket into the lottery of Western States, not a golden ticket. I'm not an elite. But then I thought, let's just go for it. So Black Canyon 100K the next month. Again, it's a golden ticket race. It's seen as, a good race, and finished that one and just kept rolling with roughly doing 100K type distance all the way through, doing one of the hardest races in Colorado called Never Summer 100K with notorious North Diamond ascent, which is just a ridiculous climb. And I think it's right around 11,000 feet of altitude. So, yeah, and I forgot to mention, a month before that, I tried to do the Silver King in Leadville, which is the Silver Rush bike race 50 on Saturday. And then the next day you have to do the Silver King Run 50 miler.
That sounds like a really cool event.
I mean, if you really want to test yourself, I mean, it's just amazing. It starts at 10,200 feet. It goes up to, there's 4 big climbs throughout the race that go up to 12,000 feet. So when you're racing at 12,000 feet, just like, it's a totally different experience. And you have to nail down nutrition and hydration at altitude because your body just functions totally differently. So finishing that and actually having, like, I did not know how that run was going to go because my body was beat up from all the kind of the rocky trails in Leadville. But it gave me a lot of confidence going into Never Summer, finishing Never Summer, respectable time given the weather and conditions there, sub 20 hours, and then flying out to Europe. And UTMB seen within the ultra running world as like kind of the Olympics on an annual basis for ultra runners. And CCC is the 100K kind of sister race to the 106 mile UTMB race. And I actually had a really great race. So it gave me a ton of confidence, and flying back, I'm like, how do I top this experience? Like I just went out to the most competitive 100, it was actually 65-mile race, and finished top 500 out of 2,500 people, which again, I'm middle of the pack. So I had a great race. And I'm like, how do I top this? And, I talked to Candace Burt, the race director of the Moab 240, and she's like, your spot's here if you want it. Nice. So yeah, I think it was like maybe 30 days later. It was a pretty quick turnaround. A lot of people I talked to were like, how did you recover from CCC and go into Moab 240? And I don't know if my body figured out how to recover quicker throughout the year. But yeah, Moab 240, man, I mean, it takes a lot even just to sign up for that race. It's a totally different experience. It's you're going out for an adventure. You know, I had done the math, or I have an Excel sheet that I use for all my ultras, and it broke when I put in 240 miles. It didn't know how to like figure out my time at all. It literally broke. Um, and I had to rebuild an Excel model just to handle it. And I was looking at 86 hours as kind of my best case scenario. And then I was like kind of concerned that if this was a bad race, how long it could take. So you have 4.5 days, I think is the cutoff. Or it might be a little bit more than 4.5, but days.
Yeah. So what was your strategy going in?
It was I was trying to run at 100-mile pace because that's all I knew, and I liked the unknown. I didn't know how I was going to feel. I knew I was completely drained at the end at like mile 90. Well, at mile 100 of both my hundreds, I was pretty much drained and just destroyed. But both those races I had pushed into the finish line. And in the back of my head, I'm like, you know, I still have some energy left. Like maybe if I had taken it easier for the 5 or 10 miles into the finish, like maybe I could have gone 120, 130. But yeah, it was totally going into the unknown. And part of me loved that. And part of me was, you know, scared as hell going into the unknown. But I assembled like an all-star crew that I knew if things got ugly, like at least I wouldn't die out there, you know, or very low risk on that front.
Good plan.
I mean, and sadly, I mean, once you go into this extreme realm beyond probably I'd say beyond 150 miles is pretty extreme for one run. And
I think most people think longer than a marathon's pretty extreme, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, we're talking extreme of the extremes.
Right, yeah. We're getting real
yeah.
Really far down the rabbit hole here.
I mean, and I have a YouTube video. It's called Running 4 Days, which is kind of a pun on 4 being actually the number 4. But yeah, I dropped my nutrition bag, which had 1,000, probably 1,000, 2,000 calories of gels and just all kinds of like snacks and stuff at mile 20. And so I found myself bonking, just totally out of energy for 30 miles. Most people bonk for 30 minutes, maybe an hour or two. But yeah, 30 miles of bonking and just being destroyed was like the lowest level of, it just put me in the lowest of lows. I can't really explain it. I mean, I try in my book. But to be able to, I mean, I describe it as coming back from the dead, essentially, around mile 75, coming in the aid station, eating as much food as possible, taking a 45-minute nap, and like coming out of it, and then being able to just rebuild myself from the bottom up and running, like really, really running, and having my best mile of the race at right around 210, running at a 8:35 pace, and
Damn.
smiling and enjoying mile 210 was just, yeah, there were so many highs, so many lows, but pain's not linear. Pain comes in cycles. So I know your listener, I mean, you guys are going through a heck of a lot, carrying crazy stuff around and like really putting your body through a lot. But pain, you'd think starts low, ends high. But as you really push your limits, you figure out that your body actually cycles through that kind of thing. So as long as you're handling hydration, nutrition, and when it really gets extreme, sleep, yeah, it comes through in cycles, and yeah, I learned a lot about myself at Moab 240, and I probably not only ran, but I truly think mile 210 was the best mile I've ever run my whole life. It, um, it sounds crazy. And I also think I ran 1 mile, I think it was right around mile, I don't know, 170, 160 in just pure bliss. Like it was 1 mile of running like I'd never experienced before. So I've run in flow before, all kinds of different flows, which is you don't even feel anything. Like it's not a runner's high. It's just like a next level of living in the present. And I really found out a lot about myself during that 1 mile. And yeah, it was a crazy experience. I mean, I hallucinated out of my mind for a few hours. Like I was hallucinating snakes all over the trails. But they all looked the same. So, and there were a lot of pine cones that had been smashed down, and they had transformed into looking like small, like coiled snakes. And then we'd have to climb over logs that transformed into like snakes that were so ridiculously big. I was like, okay, that's like clearly not a snake. This is getting just out of control.
Are these daytime hallucinations or nighttime?
These are all daytime.
I've done some pretty extreme sleep deprivation things, and I've only hallucinated during the day once.
Okay.
And at night, I feel like so most of my hallucinations are from military stuff. And at night, when you're under night vision goggles, the green and black, the shapes aren't super clear. So a lot of times it's like raw shot ink blot tests. Like as you
Totally.
start looking through, your mind will just start filling in what it knows. So I mean, I've seen all sorts of stuff, crazy stuff at night, but I only got one daytime hallucination. It was like I was pulling security at again, it was at Ranger School after basically I was in charge. So when you're in charge, you have this like rush of adrenaline because you're being graded, so everything's kind of on you. So you're very hyperactive for like 12 hours, and then you're like, all right, you're not in charge anymore, and you're like your body crashes. And it was right after one of my graded sessions, and I was sitting on patrol, and I saw like what I would describe as like a hairless space monkey like jumping around in front of me. And I did the same thing you did. Like I saw that, and I was like, what the? And I was like, no, this has got to be fake. That, there's no way something would come that close, like an animal would come that close to us on security. And I snapped at
Yeah,
it.
you can rationalize through it. I mean, the next level of hallucination that I'm fortunate that I didn't experience was you don't even have rationalization of the fact that you're hallucinating. You think it's real.
Yeah.
Just a whole different level. I mean, I think over 4 days I slept just under, I think it was 4 hours and like 50 minutes or something. And I was so out of it. Like if you watch the YouTube movie, like
And we'll repost it to the Strength and Speed Facebook page.
It's like mile 190. And I'm telling my pacer and crew, the guy that's videoing, like, yeah, we've probably slept like 4 or 5 hours, but really I was so out of it, like I couldn't even count correctly. So I was more like 2 hours or 2.5 hours.
Nice.
Which is pretty bad, but going 4 days straight, basically. I mean, I think the longest, and these were episodes where I get into my crew car. We had like a camping bag set up. I would close my eyes and then open them. And I was like, I don't even know if I slept or not. Like, and I had times where I literally just laid down on the trail. Like my pacer had to take a leak, and I was like, I felt very primal, looking for like pine needles, and it's crazy. I mean, I pushed my limits. I went to Moab 240 to see what I was capable of doing. I wanted to push my limits, and I knew beyond 100 miles was the 100-mile mark. Before that was my limit. And so I didn't know what was beyond that. And I think as long as you have kind of a safety net set up for this type of experience, like I had pacers for 175 miles. I had a team of 4 guys that all in their own right, were doing their own ultra marathon, 50-mile ultra marathons essentially.
Right.
And I mean, have that safety net, but don't be scared to test your limits. And after you break through these walls, all of a sudden you're like, I mean, your military background. I read Goggins' book, and I'm like, man, you know, going through, where do I sign up to try out for the SEALs? That sounds like a great week. Like, can I sign up for a fun hell week? Like, I'm willing to test myself on that front. Like, so
So it's funny you mentioned that the obstacle course racing world, you can't go through a full hell week, but you can go through things that are like 60 hours long. We have things like Death Race, we have Go Ruck Selection, we have yeah. So most of them are shorter, but I will say, like, having gone through some military training and some pretty hard courses, one of the things that makes those courses super hard is their length, right? Like, I mean, some of them are weeks long, so it's not like, all right, I'll just power through it for this weekend and I'll be good. It's like, nah, this is 3 weeks, or this is 2 months, and if I fail, I'll have to do a section of that over again. So theoretically, I could be here for 6 months.
I mean, all I know is 96 hours. So, or 95 hours and like 56 minutes. So like almost exactly 4 days straight. And that's just nonstop. And what's cool,
And
I mean,
I'll also caveat the military training with this, right? It's not nonstop. You're essentially working or training for periods, and then you're resting, or even when you're supposed to be awake, but you're pulling security, I'm essentially laying down in the middle of the woods. So,
I mean, and it's just weird because you get through something like Moab 240, and honestly, it would be awesome to see David Goggins do a Moab 240 or something extreme. He's done a lot of hundreds, and honestly, I think I'm shocked that the military doesn't just have like a recruitment center at the finish line. Like special forces is just right there. Like, hey, yeah, you made it through 240s, so we'll consider you. Um, but seriously though, like it took me probably a week or two of just like recovery, and I was walking the next day, like not great, but um, because you're not totally, I mean, you're almost never lactic through that whole court. You're always aerobic as much as possible. But yeah, 2 weeks after, I'm like, how do you top this? Like, I don't know what to do. Motivation for me a lot of times is find a personal goal that's like super motivating to you. Like it's not a competition. Like just because I'm signed up for the Triple Crown doesn't make me better or worse than anyone else. I mean, it literally is the only thing out there within like the defined racing world that motivates me to actually wake up and train and work towards some hard goal that I think's borderline impossible. So I know a lot of people are probably like just doing Bigfoot 200 in August. I think it has like 45,000 feet of gain, and it's a mountainous 200 miler. It's like 206 miles or something to that effect, and it circumnavigates Mount Rainier, I believe.
mm-hmm.
Like just goes all the way around it. It's just yeah, it's what's motivating me. So I'm just a big proponent in find something that motivates you, whether it's pushing a certain time on a 5K or a PR at whatever race is doing it for you, or it doesn't even have to be an actual race. I mean, it could be just my wife hates actual races. She loves running and getting out just for 3 or 4 miles, but she can't stand races. I mean, if you can't stand races, just find a goal, but then don't overly focus on it. It's weird because I mean, I'm doing the Triple Crown, and all I'm thinking about is just pace yourself great for mile 1 of Bigfoot 200, because I can't do anything more than that. And if I overly focus on the future, I might get all hung up on it. And truly, it's not going to help me at all if I overly obsess on it. It's living in the present for mile one, living in the present for mile two, and going from there. And after 650 miles of the Triple Crown, I'll be done. But you can't, it's kind of cliche, but you can't eat the whole elephant, or whatever the saying is, in one bite.
How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Yeah, exactly.
I use that saying all the time. I love it.
Because you really can't achieve these big goals in ultra running without just focusing in on the present. And that's helped me a lot. Like, I found meditating through running, and it's helped me deal with stress. So like working full time, all the family stuff that's going on, like there's just a lot going on behind the scenes beyond just training. And I found flow in running. And then I kept figuring out that flow was more of like a meditation that I've figured out. And I'm a very visual thinker, which does not help on standardized tests, by the way. But visual thinkers can also, if you train your brain properly, you can turn the slide deck off and all of a sudden live in the present, which takes things to like a whole different level. I know meditation's kind of like this weird, there's kind of like a misconception on it, but I think, it's definitely helped me just day to day, like, a lot of little anxieties and stresses disappeared because I just can turn off being hung up on past decisions. Did I do that right? Could I have done it better? Like, and then I'm not, stressing on future things, and I'm living the present, and it allows me to do a lot more. So
I get it. I find that I'm going to, in the ultra running or ultra endurance sports world, you'll get into situations where things like you feel terrible, right? Like the lowest of the lows. And I find that because I've experienced that, when things go wrong at work or, something in my personal life is not perfect, I find I'm more resilient, where it's like, well, at least I'm not like, in a ton of pain and I'm dehydrated and walking through the, course X or, and same thing goes with a lot of my military experience, right? Like, things will go wrong and it'll be like, well, no one tried to kill me today, so that's a positive.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the bank.
Can't imagine that one. But yeah, if I have like 5 projects and like all of a sudden my boss throws 2 more at me and it's like, oh my gosh, like I literally go into my ultra mind frame of, well, let's focus on mile 1. Let's focus on project 1 right now, or at least this part of it. And I just start knocking out miles. Like, and yeah, I totally can relate. And it makes, instead of just being average because you're so stressed out about all these things that you have, you're able to let that all evaporate and focus in on what the task is at hand. And I end up actually performing much better because I'm not overly stressed about having so much stuff to do. And I mean, it's one of the most common questions I get. Even my dad's like, I don't understand how you do all this stuff. Like, how do you have time? And I think truly just living in the present and zeroing in on the goal at hand and just enjoying the conversation that you're in right now allows me not to get stressed about how much I actually do. So I end up doing a lot more than probably is seen as normal. Gotcha. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. And I think there was a lot of lessons learned that, obstacle course racers can take away from that conversation and that talk you just had, that they can apply to their own life and their own sport and lessons.
Now, totally. I mean, if the previous obstacle went like crap, like don't think about the previous obstacle. Think about the obstacle at hand, and that will let you'll get over it and move forward and have a lot better race than being all sour because you had one bad bad area.
Now with the 200-mile races, I mean, they are so long. Like, in my mind, it's almost like a different sport. It's like trekking versus pure ultra running. Because are the guys winning, like running the whole 200? Is anyone running the whole 200?
The females that are winning a lot of times. Courtney Dauwalter is someone you should definitely talk to at some point. Yeah, they are mixing it up. Like, so it's choose what's most efficient and it gets amplified. Like ultra running, even a 50K or a 50 miler, some of the shorter, if I should dare say that, ultra is like, it's all about efficiency. And so if there is a steep incline, it's just more efficient to hike. And it depends on the grade and like, it also depends on a lot of variables like the heat. So like you'll be strategic during those races. Well, it gets amplified times 10 during a 200. So you have to be very strategic. That's what I really like about it. And it's kind of like the master's level course in ultra running. Like it takes like literally every single ultra I had run previous, all, I don't know, 20 ultras that I had done prior to Moab. I was taking lessons learned from each of them and applying them during the race, real time. And little things like the heat of the day, it was like, I think I was 30 hours in and I hit it right around 100 miles and it got really hot. It was maybe 90 degrees and we're in the desert without any kind of shade. And so I knew I was tired and hungry. So I utilized, I was just rational about it. Like, let's take the time to sleep. So I took a nap for 20 or 25 minutes and made sure to eat three sandwiches or some ridiculous amount of food. But you just have to be smart and efficient. And yeah, as the distance gets longer, if you have a weakness, it's very apparent. So
good stuff. We talked a little bit about this in the Hammer Nutrition private athletes group. But so recently as in the end of 2018, early 2019, so World's Toughest Mudder, the biggest 24-hour obstacle course race, went from lots of prize money down to no prize money for any category. And I have a series of articles prepared, but that I'm still kind of fine-tuning. But I just want to do a quick comparison. So tell me about the ultra running world and prize money. Like what are there big races with prize money, or are there
there's
none?
Like maybe one or two.
Yeah,
it'd be much easier just to talk about Run Rabbit Run, which is kind of a unique animal in Steamboat Springs. It's a very difficult course, but I think it's the one race, and I don't know why it has such a prize purse. Maybe because it's in August, big race month, obviously, for ultra running, and just to attract talent, it somehow has figured out how to give away like pretty sizable checks. I want to say $10,000 roughly. But to also win Run Rabbit Run, you have to devote 6 months of training towards it. So yeah, if you're in ultra running, it's almost impossible to make that a profession. So a lot of guys will try to do coaching mixed in with, and again, these are like the best of the best. Coaching mixed in with maybe having a shoe deal, having one or two sponsors on that front and just squeaking by. Like there's probably 10 people that can actually be legit ultra runners as a profession. There's no money in it because that's not why people run ultras. And yeah.
Why do you think it is that there's not a demand for money from the top athletes in the sport? Obviously, we're hypothesizing here, but just kind of your opinion.
It's a good question. Like, you win the Super Bowl of ultra running, Western States, and maybe you'll get a North Face contract or something like that. So, I mean, again, you have to be just basically literally born to run to win Western States. It's super elites. And same with UTMB. It's actually probably harder to win UTMB also. No prize money at all. And yeah, why are they not demanding money? Probably because there is no money to actually give away. I mean, they could maybe start charging people $1,000 to run some of these local races. I just think it's expensive to put on races like this.
Yep.
I mean, and I don't think the race directors are making a ton of money. A lot of guys are just doing this as like volunteer work. Like Run Rabbit Run does give away a lot of money to charity too. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's a great question. It's worth exploring more. And there's been a lot of talk, like, how do we compensate these guys? Like, it just, right now, there's no real solution. Like, you can't crowdsource. It's just hard.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I usually write articles about is I compare obstacle course racing to other sports, and I posted that question in the Hammer Nutrition group. What's your sport and kind of what's the prize money for your ultra distance sport, and pretty much across the board, like obstacle course racing is like the only one that has ever had prize money. Really, I mean, like you said, Run Rabbit Run has a pretty big prize purse, but like Western States, Leadville, I couldn't find any information for the 200-mile, the Triple Crown of 200 milers on prize money. Someone posted.
There's no money.
Yeah, someone posted the 340-mile canoe race or paddling race that's in Missouri. It's the longest essentially continuous paddling race. No prize money in that. We have a couple of ultra cyclists in there, and no prize money there. So I started doing. I have essentially a series of articles coming out, which I haven't figured out exactly how I'm gonna wrap it all up. But ultra sports just doesn't have a lot of prize money, and I think one of the problems is it covers too big of an area, right? Like if you're covering 100 miles of ground, like a lot of times you need permits, and then you might need porta potties, and you might need aid station, and like you said, the race directors aren't making a whole lot of money. So
there's only maybe 5 race directors that are legit making a living off it, and they're the best at what they do. And I don't think they're driving Ferraris. That's for sure. But yeah, I think part of it's also ultra running. Like, we think it's such a big sport or such a big deal. And like, when you zoom out, it's like 20,000 people out of billion. There's billions of people on the planet, and there's probably only legit 50,000 people in the entire world that are ultra runners. And so if you're Nike and you have 1% of your budget to allocate, are you going to spend money on developing trail shoes, or are you going to expand a new, I don't know, a mass sport, market in, I don't know, a place like China where there's just this huge consumer base that, your return on that investment is definitely going to be in China, not trail running. So it's a difficult situation for trail running.
So I did an internship actually where I worked at Under Armour for 3 weeks, and one of the things I was disappointed with was how very, and it's obvious when you think about it, how they're very just like, it's a fashion thing. It's like, here's our new shirt, it's available in these colors and blah, 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 blah. And, like, occasionally they try to sell you, they market something with having like better quote unquote technology. But at the same time, it's like, people just want different colors or whatever is the new style for that season. So it's, they are a sports apparel company, but at the same time, it's really a fashion company that sells stuff for sport. Because again, like you said, that's the mass market of people. It's people buying that shirt and going to the gym and lifting weights or going for a 3-mile run and coming back. Stuff like that.
I mean, I think trail running needs to be in the Olympics.
I can't believe it's not.
Maybe that is part of the issue, but I think trail runners are very relatable in terms of marketing and everything. Like, they're real people. You reach out on Instagram, and I'd say 80% of the time you'll get a response from one of the biggest names in the sport. So they're very accessible, and I find him highly inspirational. And yeah, I think that it's about time that we say enough is enough. Like maybe we do need a 100 miler or 100K in the Olympics to acknowledge that these are some of the very best athletes in the whole world. Like a Jim Walmsley not having a gold medal or any kind of Olympic debut is unreal in my head, because he is same with Killian and, Krar and all the big names in ultra running throughout the years. Like, it's really sad that our society has just basically ignored them. And I mean, you could make the same argument for your sport, obstacle course racing, having some kind of Olympic debut. If we're going to have snowboarding half pipe, come on.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think so. The other problem we get into here, which is the Olympics, we think of them as this grand ideal, but at the same time, they're a business, right? So they want something that doesn't take up a lot of space. They can draw a crowd. They can sell tickets. They can essentially use it they can air it on TV real quick. It's good marketing. And trail running does not do that. It requires setting up cameras in the woods. It's harder to get aerial shots probably. Depending on where the Olympics are, you're going to have to drive pretty far out of the city probably, because they typically held in major metropolitan areas. And if we're saying that they don't have there's not a big trail running community following it, they may be hesitant to quote unquote invest into as that sports, the Olympics. So
that's exactly the counter, and that's highly likely as to why there is no event. And there's been an argument to try to figure out a way to put it within winter. I know Eric Schranz of Ultra Runner Podcast, he lives and breathes ultra running, and he's made a comment or two to me about how it would make sense because you're in a mountainous region already.
Yeah, sure.
So if you could figure out some kind of winter connection there. But yeah, there's no easy solution, or else we turn on the Olympics every few years and see ultra running.
So the only differences I found so kind of jumping back to the prize money in ultra sports, was one, basically to put on an OCR, it essentially requires, ultra OCR is a 5-mile loop typically, and people just run it in a circle. So theoretically, it shouldn't cost that much more to operate a 24-hour race than it does to operate a single-day race. Minus, I'm sure the insurance goes up, and I'm sure, obviously you need medical coverage for all 24 hours and stuff like that. And
fixed costs would be the same. Yeah.
I think a lot of the costs should even out, which is why I think we at one point, at points we've had prize money in ultra OCR. And then now we had some pretty big sponsors the last couple of years for World's Toughest Mudder that I'm sure footed a lot of the bill for that. And then I think the other thing is really just establish norms, right? Like ultra OCR, started with prize money. So I think people are expecting prize money. So that's kind of what they're used to versus, ultra running started a little more, people just getting out there and testing their limits. So I think they're not having prize money per se.
Ultra running's newer. And obviously obstacle course racing is also, but we have this current model, and until someone's willing to try something different and new and just totally out there, I think the repetitive format you could have a course that's a 5-mile loop and do 100 miles on it. So it's just a matter of breaking the mold, and maybe that's where prize money comes from eventually.
24-hour races on a track, right?
They do that. Yeah, they do. I think Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin has like 6 days in the dome or something like that, which is literally an indoor track, and people will do it for 6 days straight. And Air Viper Racing is going to have a 10-day race, I believe, on a very reasonable track. So someone's going to break the mold. But currently things are great. Within ultra running, it's a sport that's growing to the point where it's almost exceeding what it has been set up to do. So a lot of races are lotteries now, and It
Yeah.
takes 5 years to get to Western States as an average runner. Um, but yeah, it's it's becoming, I think, more popular because people are realizing after they finish Boston or their local marathon, they're looking for the next thing. And I've been there, I've experienced it, and you need that next motivational race to sign up for. And just doing another marathon quicker, it's appealing to a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, setting new PRs and stuff, but a lot of people are looking for that next thing, and it's a 50K, and then you hit the trails and you realize, like, oh, this is not just about distance. This is about changing everything you know about running. You're climbing up the steepest mountains. You're having to learn to run technical trail. You're learning to fuel properly and hydrate differently. And yeah, it just, and then after the 50K, obviously, some people get hooked on trying to go for that next distance, which, I mean, it can be unhealthy, but
Yeah.
if you're smart about it, I use it as a huge motivational driver for me. Like when I'm signed up for something like the Triple Crown, I have a little chalkboard next to my coffee maker. So every morning when I turn the coffee maker on, I see my chalkboard with my goals that are written down. And it's not about obsessing on future goals. It's about opening the refrigerator and not making those choices I've made in the past, like making healthy choices because I know I have that race coming up. So it helps me a ton in life, and I'm kind of leveraging that. So it's on like a subconscious level, making healthy nutritional choices, and it's truly been life changing for me. Enough so that I felt like writing a book could motivate your average runner, middle of the pack at best. And when you take a step back away from whether elites are getting compensated for winning races and all that stuff, you see a bell-shaped curve, and most runners, I mean, just statistics say most runners are average. Um,
Yes.
and I think there's not enough. You've read all running books out there. There's only a small handful on running from the middle of the pack to back of the pack. And trust me, I've been very, very back of the pack a lot of times. And I truly am like middle of the pack at best during these crazy races. So um yeah, it's life changing having that meaningful goal, and what's meaningful is all relative to each of us. So just make sure you truly pick something that's motivational to you, that gets you out of bed early in the morning with a smile, that you have this to work towards. And that's the best part of this is, if you're lying to yourself. Like, it doesn't matter what other people have on their schedule. What matters is when you wake up and you are excited to get out for that easy 6 miler or whatever you have on your schedule. Is life changing. So
I think that's some great advice because in the obstacle course racing world, we have this like you need to do everything, all events, regardless of distance. Because some of our top athletes are actually, I mean, they're just phenomenal. They race everything from 3K short course to 24-hour length and everything in between, and do well. So I think sometimes you look at the top of the sport and you're like, oh well, if that's what they're doing, I should be doing the same thing. And some people may not enjoy a 3K OCR, and some people don't enjoy a 12-hour or 24-hour one. So definitely some good
that's,
advice
I
there.
mean, ultimately, unless you are the elite guy who's winning these races and making a living off it, which is not basically anyone listening right now, don't feel bad about signing up for that 3K. I mean, life's too short. Do what makes you happy. Do what is going to give you some longevity. So yeah, you could go really try to crush your 12-hour and break yourself and be out for 6 months or even a year, or maybe you can't even, do that climb that you used to be able to do all the time. So like, be smart about it. Look at the long term, and and don't compare, if you're doing the 3K course, like it doesn't make you better or worse compared to a 12-hour race. It's do what motivates you to be doing this for the long run and making healthy choices and, getting those workouts in and just being happy. I mean, life's too short. Just enjoy the conversation you're in. Enjoy the workout that you're in right now.
Good stuff there. So we want to start wrapping things up here. Before we let you go, though, your book, Training for Ultra, tell us a little bit about it, where people can find it.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't give away too much stuff about it. It's available, physical copies, just on my website. I've made a concerted effort not to have it on Amazon. So physical copy, trainingforultra.com, and then I do have a digital copy that's on Kindle, which is Amazon, and then I will have an audiobook out in a few weeks also for those who like Audible, and I think it'll be available on iTunes.
And what's the general, give us quick, general synopsis of the book?
I mean, we talked a little bit about my journey, but it dives deeper. So it starts way at the beginning, maybe a chapter or two about before my dad's health scare. And then it goes literally, it's my first 3 years of running. And it dives into a lot of, I had fun being creative, like, really trying to paint the picture of what's taking place during these races. So you'll hear, like I just said, never summer 100K, like it's a hard race. Well, there's a whole chapter on that race. It's more than just a race recap. And there's a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes that I tried to share. And there's a lot of chapters on Moab 240.
Nice.
It was life-changing on a lot of levels. And yeah, I mean, hopefully it'll inspire you. So don't read the last chapter first. I tried to end with a bang and really finish the book to motivate you to get out there, find that motivational goal and just go for it. So
and
hopefully you like it.
Where can people find your podcast?
Podcast is on all the outlets, same as yours, and it's just called Training for Ultra. And I try to find inspirational stories. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of elites, and I mix in just a variety of backgrounds, but it's whoever's motivating me. So sometimes I'll reach out to someone who DNF'd a race that is a really great runner, and I try to mix it up and hear from a lot of people. I love finding those elite guys that aren't elites yet, that don't, haven't done a podcast interview before. And I also try to throw in a lot of tips. So we always talk about gear and nutrition and all that stuff. So I want you to learn stuff while having some good entertainment. But yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of work. And as you know, it's very high, podcast is probably the highest paid job out there.
Yeah, right.
Lucky to break even.
Absolutely. Well, give us a couple of episodes that you personally recommend. So if someone's just getting into your podcast and you're like, hey, these are a couple of good episodes, definitely to start off with.
I mean, and I know this is kind of cliche, but I do take away something from each and every one. There are, I'll just highlight 2 or 3. Most popular episodes would be how to run 100 miles with Carl Meltzer, the speed goat. I mean, he has a Hoka 1-1 shoe, that line that, very popular shoe. He's run tons of hundreds. He's probably one of the best 100-mile racer. He's done the AT. He's a great ambassador for the sport, and his episode did really well. And he gave a lot of really good advice. I think the episode with Sally McRae, she's a Nike Trail Elite runner, hit home. Her story is just unbelievable, and the way it came together was unreal. So hopefully you won't cry when you hear it, but if you want to be motivated by a truly inspirational person, Sally McRae episode's awesome. And I'll finish with Brian Frank, the founder, owner of Hammer Nutrition, we walked through for one of the episodes. It was called something like How to Fuel and Hydrate or something to that effect. Literally, we went through a hypothetical 100K from the week before the race to the week after the race and everything in between from the vantage point of fueling and hydrating, which honestly, I learned stuff that I utilized in my own races, and it's been, highly downloaded. And I think it's all these episodes, there's just people are taking away stuff that is helping them during their races. So I think that Hammer Nutrition episode would help every single listener in some regards. So
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to go back and check those out. I've listened to a couple episodes of yours, but not all of them. So I will put those towards the top of my download list.
cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll be listening to yours too.
And so obviously big in the ultra running world. Let's couple of gear recommendations, your personal opinion on like shoes, socks, anything else that's kind of you feel necessary for ultra running.
Yeah, I mean, shoes, there's only a few like real notorious trail runner shoes. I mean, Ultra, that is now a sort of like a North Face VF Corp company, but yeah, Ultra has a zero drop, so you can't just try them out like immediately. You kind of work into them slowly, so you don't mess up your knees. But it's more of a natural way of running, and they have a giant toe box. I use those. I mix them up with Hoka's, which are known for being like kind of a more cushioned shoe. Sometimes they're the real early models look kind of goofy. And then Solomon's are for guys with like real slim feet for the most part. But I would say biggest advice on shoe front, and I'm not sponsored by any shoe companies, is size up half a size. So if you're a 9, go with a 9.5 and just trust me on that. And socks, I am sponsored by Exoskin. They make like a real high tech, breathable, it's like a thinner sock, but I was able to do Moab 240 without any blisters, which is kind of unreal. And my biggest advice, use some kind of foot lube. So I use something called Squirrel's Nut Butter, which is you just rub it all over your feet, get it all over your toes. And I use toe socks a lot of times. I take a lot of heat on that, but slide those puppies in. Like, it feels uncomfortable for like the first 2 minutes, but yeah, if you've done that properly and your feet aren't, you can't do like a river crossing at mile 5 of a 100-miler and not destroy your feet. Like, it's pretty hard. But yeah, you can give yourself the best chance, and that's how I'd recommend it.
Awesome. And so we're going to wrap things up. Any final shout outs you want to give to friends, family, sponsors, etc.?
I mean, I'm just thankful you had me on, and of course I gotta give a shout out to Sufferfest Beer. Having a beer sponsor is pretty cool.
That's pretty good because I don't drink, so they don't really get beer recommendations from me. So that's a good one for.
Yeah, maybe I'll just mention them just because we've talked about Candace Burt's races and I mean Ultimate Direction, but Sufferfest Beer it was developed by an athlete for us athletes, and it's actually gluten removed. So they say like, hey Rob, don't talk about that pack because it just tastes good. So and they're going to have national distribution. They're in California and Colorado, and they have Amelia Boone as one of their athletes.
Oh, nice.
So they do like your community a lot, and they're not just for trail runners. They're basically for any of us. Like, after a hard race, let's celebrate. You earned your beer. So
nice. I love it. Cool. Well, if any listeners are listening, head over to teamstrengthspeed.com. By the time this comes out, we should be shipping copies of Mud Run Guide's Ultimate OCR Bucket List. So it's got 100+ races in there of kind of like abbreviated race reviews and information on them. Allows you to really get a wide look at the sport from, anything from short course to 24-hour races and kind of everything between. OCR plus, so if you're looking for like an OCR/triathlon or OCR mixed with CrossFit, there's kind of coverage of that in the book too. So it also includes races that have gone defunct. So on top of just being like a good resource for things you might want to put on your bucket list, it's also good kind of like a look back at the sport, kind of showing some of the history of it. So pretty cool stuff there. If you're an ultra runner that doesn't normally listen to this podcast and interested in getting into ultra distance obstacle course racing, I also have my book, Mud Run Guide's Ultra OCR Bible, on my website. It's literally the only book on endurance obstacle course racing. That's it. It's just mine. So pick that up. I printed a limited number of copies, so they will eventually sell out. They've been on sale for about a year, and I've sold, say, about 70% of them. So probably sell out this year, and if not, maybe early next year. And then on top of that, we also have Blegmitch shipping from the USA. So they're the 3mm neoprene mittens with like a fleece lining. Great for extreme cold weather running or endurance obstacle course racing. They were designed by Ultra OCR champion Deanna Blegg, who's won World's Toughest Mudder once as an individual and came in, I think, second as a team. So great mitts there. Those also are selling out fast. So if you need a pair and you're wanting to wait just before World's Toughest to order them, I would order them now to make sure I have your size in stock. That's about it. Rob, thanks for coming on the podcast, and it was great talking to you.
Enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Catch you later.